Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam's first canto, first chapter, text number 2. Dharma protita kaita gotra paramonir matsaranam satam vedya mastavam atra vastu shiv vadam ta putra yunmulanam. Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni kriti kimva para ishvaraha sadyo ritya varutya tetra kritipi shushu shubis tatshanad. Goes as following. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are pure in heart. The highest truth is reality, distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Sri Vyasadeva, is sufficient in itself for God realization. As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, he becomes attached to the Supreme Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Religion includes 4 primary subjects, namely pious activities, economic development, satisfaction of the senses, and finally liberation from material bondage. Irreligious life is a barbarous condition. Indeed, human life begins when religion begins. Eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating are the 4 principles of animal life. These are common both to animals and human beings. But religion is the extra function of the human being. Without religion, human life is no better than animal life. Therefore, in human societies there is some form of religion which aims at self-realization and which makes reference to man's eternal relationship with God. In the lower stages of human civilization there is always competition to lord it over material nature, or, in other words, there is a continuous rivalry to satisfy the senses. Driven by such consciousness, man turns to religion. He thus performs pious activities or religious functions in order to gain something material. But if such material gains are obtainable in other ways, the so-called religion is neglected. This is the situation in modern civilization. Man is thriving economically, so at present he is not very interested in religion. Churches, mosques, or temples are now practically vacant. Men are more interested in factories, shops, and cinemas than in religious places which were erected by their forefathers. This practically proves that religion is performed for some economic gains. Economic gains are needed for sense gratification. Often, when one is baffled in the pursuit of sense gratification, he takes to salvation and tries to become one with the Supreme Lord. Consequently, all these states are simply different types of sense gratification. In the Vedas, the above-mentioned 4 activities are prescribed in the regulative way so that there will not be any undue competition for sense gratification. But Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental to all these sense gratificatory activities. It is purely transcendental literature which can be understood only by the pure devotees of the Lord who are transcendental to competitive sense gratification. In the material world, there is keen competition between animal and animal, man and man, community and community, nation and nation. But the devotees of the Lord rise above such competitions. They do not compete with the materialist because they are on the path back to Godhead where life is eternal and blissful. Such transcendentalists are non-envious and pure in heart. This is why we have to get the book. No, it's fine. It's my own fault. We should get the book. I can't find the last part, so we'll stop there. So it starts tomorrow in the material world, because we'll also cut this text into two, because it's so big. So I know Chaitanya will be happy to elaborate on this verse too. So, so in the first verse of this amazing literature, the who and why of the absolute truth was explained. Srila Vyasadeva, the author of the Srimad Bhagavatam, starts with offering his obeisance to the Supreme Lord. In the very first sentence, he states that Supreme Absolute Truth is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. And then he goes on to explain why Krishna is the Absolute Truth. And he starts with the first verse goes, Janma Dyashaya Tonvayad. So Janma Dyashaya Taha. This is also practically the beginning of the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra, Veda Anta, the end or conclusion of the Vedas. So the Vedanta Sutra is the whole purpose of the Vedas in sutra form, in very concise forms. And the second verse of those starts in the same way. Janma Dyashaya Taha. So the Absolute Truth is that from which everything emanates. Any cause, the cause of all causes, anything can go back to that cause. And that is the Supreme Personality of God and Lord Krishna. So that is stated both in the Vedanta Sutra as well as in the first text of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And after establishing that, then the second verse today is explaining the unique position of this scripture, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and how it is distinct from all other religious scriptures. In this material world, there are so many religious scriptures, as stated in the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Human life, civilized life, starts with religion. If there is no religion, it is simply animal life. He stated it was a barbarous civilization if religion is not added. The animals are engaged in 4 basic principles: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. They can do nothing else. And if the human society is simply based on the same activities, although in a polished way, sophisticated way, they're in essence no different from animal life. So, in civilized human life, you have to have religious principles. You have to have progress on the path of the ultimate goal of this human form of life and this material cosmos. So, that's a must in civilized society. So all different kinds of societies, they basically, if they're civilized, they do have religious scriptures. So we know in the Christian tradition the different scriptures. The Bible, of course, is the basis of that. In the Muslim world, it's the Quran, and other societies, they have other scriptures. But basically, these scriptures are all engaged in 4 different, in 4 subjects: dharma, religious principles, pious activities. According to that particular religion, they have different ritualistic activities, different do's and don'ts that's propounded in those scriptures. And then they have artha, economic development. Because economic development is necessary not only for upkeeping the basic necessities of life, but also to attain sense gratification, to attain all the objects of the senses, all the physical objects of the senses. Nice house, of course, house shelter is needed, but one can get a very sophisticated, very wonderful house if you can pay the price. That needs money. And then you have karma, not to be confused with karma, but karma, K-A-M-A, which means um, means lust, it means sense gratification. So that's the result of economic development. You satisfy the senses. That's what everyone goes for in this world. That's basically why we're here. We want to enjoy the senses, the physical senses and the mind. And some want to derive a lot of satisfaction from the intelligence also, a certain class of men. So, but in general, everyone has a common thing. They want to satisfy the senses and the mind. And then finally you have moksha, or mukti, liberation from material existence. That's the last leg of those four sections of knowledge. Liberation from material suffering. So not everyone arrives at that stage, but that's also there in the different religious scriptures. The ultimate goal of those scriptures is to end all kinds of miseries. Once one realizes that it's not possible to gain full satisfaction simply by getting in contact with the material sense objects, and one gets more and more frustrated, then the aim is getting free of all that suffering and ultimately merging into the impersonal aspect of the Lord. Moksha is generally meaning attaining oneness with the impersonal aspect of the Lord. So all these different scriptures, they have, it's simply those four different subjects. They have nothing that goes beyond that. Also we know from, especially it's very, don't know the proper word, but in a very intense and way it's explained also in I guess so. I'm not sure if it's actually in the scripture of the Quran, but that's the understanding, at least of section of it. Again, proves there's nothing beyond those four. That their object, their goal, is simply sense gratification, because if they perform a great yajna, a great sacrifice on behalf of those religious principles, then they'll attain immense sensory satisfaction. They want to go to the heavenly planets, Svargaloka. That's in the Bible, that's in the Quran. And the example from before is some who, they might be twisted, it might be there in the scripture, I'm not sure, but the understanding of certain section of the Muslim world is that even if they make the sacrifice of killing for the sake of their religion, kill whatever innocent people, of course they might not consider them innocent, but if they kill for the sake of Islam, then they'll go to that heavenly planet, and what will they do there? They'll attain 72 virgin women. That's the goal. So what is that to do with God? You're going to engage in intense sense gratification. It's nothing to do with pleasing the Lord. It's simply pleasing your own senses in a way that's unobtainable in this material platform. So that's what they want to do. Sense gratification, they want sex life. And also the four followers of the Vedas, we know there's three basic sections of the Vedas, the Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Upasana Kanda. And the Karma Kanda section is involved in the same way. You follow that section of the Vedas, you perform pious activities, you live very religiously, very pious, you do all the things that's stated there, you live a very kind of pure life. You regulate your senses according to what's there in the scriptures. And the goal is Svargaloka, where you can enjoy in the Kanana gardens. I've got the word of that, something like that. So you enjoy in these heavenly gardens. That's the same in Islam, it's the same in Christianity. You got these wonderful places where everything is wonderful. Trees, breezes, flowers, everything is just nice. We know we all like to enjoy that when it's kind of spring, summer. We have a nice setting, there's a lake, there's swans, birds chirping, everything is just wonderful. So you feel more inclined to enjoy. Also in this material world, springtime, everything is flowering. And at that time of the year, everyone is very eager to engage in the senses. So a lot of children gets, brought into this world at that time, because that's just the whole atmosphere. It's like perfect for sense gratification. So the people of those scriptures, they want that situation permanently, those wonderful gardens. And that's there in the different religious traditions. So, everyone is there wanting to enjoy the senses. But the Srimad Bhagavatam is not a scripture meant for that activity. So opposite all these different scriptures, both in other religious traditions and also in the Vedas, in the Karmakanda section, the purpose is not to engage the senses. It is a much higher gain, much higher than moksha, than impersonal liberation. The very highest goal of all, that's what's being propounded throughout the Bhagavatam. So that's being built up like this here. So we know that the very essence and the nature of sense gratification, which everyone is mad for in this world, is one is not able to gain really satisfaction, deep satisfaction. It's only a temporary satisfaction. There is some pleasure in sense gratification, of course, otherwise people wouldn't be pursuing it. And they are going through so many hardships to gain that sense gratification. That's kind of the epitome of it, is like in sex life. Because there's so much work following sex life. You have to raise children, you have to work hard. A man, natural position, he has to work hard to support his family. That's in kind of civilized traditional societies. You cannot rely on anyone else. You cannot rely on the system. You cannot rely on your parents. You cannot rely on your uncle. Some may be able to do that, but in general you have to work hard, and a man has to support his family. So, and we see in this modern society, in certain parts of this world, people have to take 2 and even 3, and I even heard more jobs to support the family. It's like that in the United States now. And you've got a lot of like single parents, mostly women, having to support their family, and they have to take 3 or 4 jobs because it's such a low basic whatever income they get, the mindsteløn, the whatever you call, whatever the different working places have to pay their employees, it's very low, and so they cannot support their family simply by having one job. They have to take several jobs. And what does that involve? Well, a lot of hard work and a lot of neglect on their kids and whatever. So they work hard like anything. That's simply what they have to do. And also, in like sex life, there's an enjoyment. There's a very short enjoyment, and then you have to work hard. You may get kids that are not according to what you actually thought they should be, and they may cause you a lot of trouble. Even though the parents may be good and they may do everything right, they must supply everything for the child may still grow up crooked. We know the examples from the Bhagavatam with King Vena. Grew up, became a very, very bad son, even though he had like perfect parents, very pious, very religious parents. And we see it all the time in this world too. And also so many devotees, they give everything they can to the child, trying to raise them properly, but they have no interest in Krishna consciousness, and sometimes they go really bad. So, so there's a lot of austerity, a lot of trouble involved in that sense gratification. So, and that goes with basically everything. Engaging the tongue with palatable dishes and whatever, and you just eat a little bit too much and then you get indigestion. So the Bhagavatam is not propounding what all the other religious systems are, because ultimately you won't get any satisfaction from that. The scriptures state that again and again. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's stated several times. Yehi samsparshadya bhoga dukkha yonaya evati adhyantavanta kauntiya nati shu ramati buddha. So, material sense gratification, contact with the senses, with the sense objects, it's there's simply dukkha, sukha dukkha, pleasure, sukha dukkha, misery, and adi means from beginning, anta, to the end. There's no substance there. They have a beginning and end, and because they have a beginning and end, they're not able to satisfy the eternal soul. So we eternal, we can only obtain real satisfaction from that which is of the same nature, which is transcendental on the spiritual platform. And anything in the material world, material sense gratification, has a beginning and an end, and it's not real like that. This has been very nicely described in the other lectures. It's like a dream. A dream is flickering. We may obtain some, in a dream it may be very great, and we enjoy in the dream something wonderful we cannot obtain in the awake state. But it's not real. There's no substance to it. It's only some whatever imaginary pleasure we have while we are in the dream. And once we wake up, it's all... Sometimes we just want to hang on to that dream because it's so great, it's so wonderful. We accomplish things we cannot accomplish in the awake state. And other times, of course, it's also nice to wake up because we may have very bad dreams. So material sense gratification is the same. It has a beginning and end, and in that sense it's like a dream. It's not real, and thus it cannot satisfy us. So those who are Buddha, those who are intelligence, Nati Shu Ramati Buddha. Buddhi is intelligence. So those who has real intelligence, Nati, they do not derive, they do not engage in this flickering sense gratification. This is stated all throughout the Vedic scriptures. It's also stated very powerfully by 5th canto, Rishabhadeva. Rishabhadeva is stating that Nunang pramatta kurati vikarma yat indriya pritaya aprinoti na sadhu manye yat atmanoyam asana piklesha da asadeha. That states that those who are actually intelligent, they do not those who are not intelligent, who pursue sense gratification and see it as the goal in life, they become mad, pramatta, with sense gratification. They become basically mad. And that we also see in material life. People can actually become mad trying to enjoy the senses and go through all kinds of hardships to obtain whatever they want. And they may perform all kinds of sinful activities, also as stated by Rishabhadeva, vikarma. They engage in vikarma, in sinful activities, in order to obtain the objects of the senses. So they may steal, they may lie, they do all kinds of things to obtain that. We know that all the time. People lie in front of others to obtain sense gratification. We see it like very extremely exhibited. People who are drug addicted, they can lie to anyone, even their parents, the close family. They can lie to them and steal from them, steal money, steal their mother's money to get the next fix. This is of course extreme, but extreme sense. But again, pramatta, they become mad for sense gratification. They have to get their fix, whether it's drugs or it's food or well sex or whatever pleasure their favorite pleasure. So they, and because they engage in these sinful activities, they get one material body after the other. So Rishabhadeva states that's not very wise. So when you engage in sinful activities, you have to take birth again. You have to get another material body and go through janma, karma, and mrityu. And they have to go through birth, death, old age, and disease, time after time again, suffering the threefold miseries. So the Bhagavatam is all through giving the highest goal of life, that which can bring the jiva, the living entity, into the highest satisfaction. And that's, as we know, that is devotional service to the Lord. The deepest nature of the jiva is Krishnera Nityadas, is an eternal servant of Krishna. And his dharma, the swadharma, the real sanatan dharma, the real eternal principle, is to engage in the service of the Lord. When you do that, the soul is engaged according to its deepest nature. And only by engaging like that, he can obtain real satisfaction. So, any other kind of endeavor to become happy in this world is futile. And one simply has shrama eva hi kevalam. You simply have to work hard, like anything, to obtain some flickering pleasure, which will not bring that which we all really search for which is the deepest, unending fulfillment. So, the Bhagavatam is very special. The Bhagavatam is filled with nectar, explaining philosophically, very deeply, how one can obtain that goal, and breaking the illusion of the conditioned soul. So when we read the Bhagavatam, really study it, it's impossible to remain in ignorance. That's why people who once attained the stage of being engaged in devotional service, if they kind of want to misuse their independence and give it up, then they stop reading the Bhagavatam, because they cannot read the Bhagavatam and remain in illusion. So you have to give it up. You have to give up the holy name. So we see throughout that so many devotees come, so many people come to Krishna consciousness, but then they give it up again. And actually I would say, on my own personal experience now, after quite some years, that the most who come, they leave again, actually. And I remember back in time, some disciples through Prabhupada, they said, when one prominent devotee left, they said, Srila Prabhupada, why are so many leaving? And Prabhupada was stating, don't be surprised how many leave, be surprised of how many stay. Because in this Kali Yuga, it's so dark, it's so filled with ignorance, that it's very hard to find someone who can actually stick to the process of devotional service. And it's also compared to the razor's edge. You walk on the razor's edge, you slip just a slight bit, and you will cut yourself very badly. So the process of devotional service is like that. You have to follow it, and if you slip a little bit, you may cut yourself. Also, like in terms of how you interact with the devotees, you have to be very careful and treat them with great respect. And if you mistreat them, you'll lose a taste. And if you mistreat them badly, somehow or another, Krishna will simply take you away. You will be deprived of the association of devotees. And so many examples are there. I remember one example a few years back, one devotee, a very special case. He was in one of the Facebook groups discussing different things. He wanted to go to India. He was a brother of another person who previously had been a bhakta. So he wanted to go to India and find a guru. And online there was some, especially with my old friend, previously known as Trai Maya, now called Bhakta Torben, he warned him. He said, be very careful about that, don't do that. He really preached very